Chapter 662. Jingyu tried to enter this cave and come out from that cave several times, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get out. This place actually has a way out. Jingyu burst into tears. She stood in place and looked at the stone walls that were almost exactly the same. Her brows furrowed deeply. Jingyu wandered around in the same place for a while. Just as she was thinking about how to continue, her sharp ears suddenly heard footsteps. Her heart skipped a beat. Her figure flashed, and she found a rock and hid in it. She then stuck out half of her head and squinted at the place where the sound came from. Quick, quick, quick. If you dilly-dally, the boss will beat you up. Aya, how could I miss the toilet? Two figures carrying large swords rushed towards Jingyu. Jingyu was overjoyed. She shrank her body even further and adjusted her breathing slightly. She watched as the two figures rushed past her and entered a cave. Jingyu paused and stood up. She carefully followed behind the two figures. The two were obviously familiar with the terrain. They wandered around the numerous caves. Jingyu followed behind them. Finally, she saw the cave in front of her. It led to the open sea. There were countless ships gathered there. There was also a fortress made of rocks. Yuan Mingyuan was sitting on top of a rock. Jingyu saw Yuan Mingyuan at a glance. He seemed to be talking to someone. Jingyu paused slightly and turned around to hide. She moved towards a rock on the side and used the rock to block her figure. Then, she looked at the movement on the sea. There was a big ship on the sea, 2 or 3 medium-sized ships, and dozens of small ships. Looking at this situation, it was really powerful. Jingyu's eyes rolled slightly. A pair of golden eyes quietly appeared. There seemed to be a green halo around the golden eyes. Jingyu narrowed her eyes and looked at the sea. The things that were originally quite far away were not obstructed by Jingyu's eyes. The figure standing at the bow of the ship was very familiar. A pair of cold eyes were looking at Yuan Mingyuan from afar. He was dressed in a black robe and stood with his hands behind his back. Who else could it be but Xiaochun? The two looked at each other for a long time. It seemed like they were negotiating. Finally, Yuan Mingyuan got down from the rock and Xiaochun's ship docked. There was a certain distance between them. Behind them were their subordinates. Xiaochun's pair of cold eyes looked at Yuan Mingyuan without any warmth. Where is she? The two indifferent words made the corners of Yuan Mingyuan's mouth curl up into a smile. It's just a woman. I'm really shocked that you, the King of Hell, mobilized all the members of the Nether sect. Xiaochun looked at Yuan Mingyuan coldly and did not say anything. This person is indeed in my hands. However, if I let you take her away so easily, wouldn't it be a waste of my brother's efforts? Yuan Mingyuan's lips curled up slightly as he said, You should know that this woman is worth a lot of money. What do you want? Xiaochun's eyes became even colder. The words he spat out were almost frostbitten. What do you think that woman is worth? Yuan Mingyuan did not say what he wanted. Instead, he gave Xiaochun a choice. When Xiaochun heard this, he immediately frowned. Chapter 663. Ha ha ha. Yuan Mingyuan laughed heartily. King of Hell, I'll give you 3 days. Within these 3 days, I won't touch a single hair on this woman. As long as you can give me something that satisfies me, I'll personally deliver her to you. If you can't give me something that satisfies me within 3 days, then I'll take this woman. As soon as Yuan Mingyuan finished speaking, Xiaochun's eyes suddenly turned cold. The intense killing intent was frightening. Yuan Mingyuan's heart skipped a beat. His eyes trembled slightly. It seemed like this woman was even more extraordinary than he had imagined. She could actually make the King of Hell so concerned. Do you really think that this king can't do anything to your lousy island? The coldness on Xiaochun's face increased inch by inch. The words he spat out were cold and emotionless. He actually looked like he was going to fight Yuan Mingyuan head-on. Jingyu was anxious. Xiaochun, don't be stupid. In this situation, the most important thing was to fight head-on. Moreover, this was the Nether sect's power. Right now, even a little bit of power was extremely precious to them. Perhaps, this Nether sect would be their most secretive trump card, or their escape route in a moment of life and death. No matter what, they couldn't just let it happen. Jingyu was anxious. However, no matter how anxious she was, she could only continue to watch. What? Does the king of hell want to fight head-on with me? Yuan Mingyuan's lips curled into a cold smile. He looked at Xiao Qian and said, if your nether sect wants to stand, no one in my Ghost King cave will be afraid of you. I only want to ask, are you really confident that you can invade my island? Rescue your woman? Xiao Qian's killing intent was boiling in his heart. He stared at Yuan Mingyuan as if he wanted to kill him on the spot. Master. Xingyi took a step forward and called out to Xiao Qian. Xiao Qian slowly clenched his hands. He looked coldly at Yuan Mingyuan and said, if she loses even a single hair, this king will definitely flatten your Ghost King cave. Xiao Qian said coldly. Then, he turned and left. Xingyi looked deeply at Yuan Mingyuan before he turned and left with Xiao Qian. Qing Gu and Jing Lang, who were standing on the ship, looked at the commotion below with confusion. What does that pirate leader want? How does he know? Qing Gu looked at Jing Lang's face. After watching for such a long time, he thought that he would be able to lead a large force and charge forward. However, after a few words, he stopped fighting. I don't know. Jing Lang also shook his head in confusion. Seeing Xiao Qian come up, the pirates also returned to the island. The two sides looked at each other from afar. Xiao Qian stood on the ship and said faintly, Go back? Go back? Go back where? Qing Gu looked at Xiao Qian in confusion. Yangzhou. Xiao Qian turned around coldly and entered the house. Jingyu watched Xiao Qian's ship leave. She sighed in relief. Fortunately, Xiao Qian didn't fight. However, the two of them had talked for so long. Yuan Mingyuan didn't say what he wanted. How did Xiao Qian know? How could he take out something that could satisfy Yuan Mingyuan? Jingyu grinned slightly. It looked like she had to be prepared to escape at any time. As Jingyu thought about it, she sneaked into the cave before Yuan Mingyuan's men came over. She had made a mark when she came out. Now, she followed the mark and walked forward. However, what the hell is going on? Did someone make the mark disappear? Chapter 664. Jingyu was completely lost in this cave. She had clearly marked the place, but when Jingyu came back, those marks were gone. Jingyu turned in a circle and walked around based on her memory. The more she walked, the more she felt that something was wrong. Jingyu walked back and finally heard voices. She turned around and said that she wanted to see if she could follow someone. However, when Jingyu turned around, she bumped into someone. Aya. Jingyu took a step back and rubbed her forehead. She looked up at the person in front of her who was blocking her way. Hee. What a coincidence. You're here too. Jingyu grinned and looked at Yuan Mingyuan, who had a strange expression on his face. She raised her hand and greeted him politely. Then she said happily, Oh, you guys are busy. I won't disturb you. I'll leave first. Jingyu said this quickly and then turned to leave. Do you think you can walk out of this Ghost King cave? Yuan Mingyuan didn't stop her. He just said this lightly. Jingyu froze and turned around to face Yuan Mingyuan with resentment. I don't want to walk out. I'm just looking for a way to go back, Jingyu said helplessly. Yuan Mingyuan raised his eyebrows and said, Don't you want to escape? Escape? Jingyu smiled and said, If I really want to leave, do you think you can stop me? What a big tone. Yuan Mingyuan's lips curved into a disdainful smile. He walked past Jingyu and said, Come with me? Jingyu was annoyed by Yuan Mingyuan's disdain. She got lost in the Ghost King cave and was caught red-handed. He even said that he couldn't stop her if she escaped. It seemed like no one would believe him. However, Jingyu wasn't lying. Looking at the situation, there must be some story between Xiao Qian and Yuan Mingyuan. She was curious. Secondly, wasn't hiding in the Ghost King cave a safe place? Could the Holy Family and Poison Sect's hands reach here? If they could lure the Tokyo-S army here, they might as well wipe them out all at once. She could take advantage of the chaos to escape. To tell the truth, Jingyu wasn't worried at all. Seeing that Xiao Qian, Jingyu, and the others were fine, she relaxed. When Yuan Mingyuan brought Jingyu back to the island, the girls were already running around in circles. When they saw Yuan Mingyuan bring Jingyu back, they were so excited that they wanted to cry. Jingyu sighed again and again as she watched Yuan Mingyuan comfort the girls. She shook violently. No wonder these girls were so infatuated with Yuan Mingyuan. Look at him. TSK, TSK, TSK. Jingyu leaned against the couch to rest. After running around for so long, she was really tired. When night fell, Jingyu was playing with a writing brush. She was focused on counting the hairs on the tip of the brush. When Yuan Mingyuan entered the room, he saw this scene. The girl in a casual robe was lying on the couch, counting the hairs on the brush. 189, 190. Jingyu was counting seriously. Yuan Mingyuan simply sat down on the couch. Jingyu's hand paused in the middle of counting. She glanced at Yuan Mingyuan and continued counting, ignoring him completely. Chapter 665. What's the point of counting this? Yuan Mingyuan asked with a slight frown. Do I have nothing better to do? Jingyu was interrupted by Yuan Mingyuan and suddenly forgot where she was counting. She angrily threw the brush in her hand on the table, stared at Yuan Mingyuan and said, "Why aren't you sleeping in the middle of the night? What are you doing in my room?" "This is my room." Yuan Mingyuan's face darkened when he heard this. How long had he slept? How did it become Jingyu's room in the blink of an eye? She really wasn't polite. "You let me sleep, so this is my room." Jingyu stared at Yuan Mingyuan and said, "If there's nothing else, hurry up and leave. Don't disturb me." "You really aren't polite." Yuan Mingyuan was so angry that he laughed. He narrowed his eyes at Jingyu and said, "The wanted poster said that you are an evildoer with different pupils. This young master has looked at you for so long. How come I can't see where you are evildoer?" "What? Are you scared?" Jingyu's mouth curved into a faint smile. Her pair of black eyes looked at Yuan Mingyuan and said, "Hee, it's just nonsense. Why would I be scared?" Yuan Mingyuan said very indifferently. He stood up and said, "In my opinion, I'm very curious. To what extent will Yama do for you?" "Che boring." Jingyu rolled her eyes indifferently. She didn't look at Yuan Mingyuan and said indifferently, "You should worry about the future of your Ghost King cave. Capturing me may not be a good thing." Hee. Yuan Mingyuan narrowed his eyes at Jingyu's petite body and said, "I'm looking forward to it." After speaking, Yuan Mingyuan walked away. Jingyu turned her head and looked at Yuan Mingyuan's back. Seeing Yuan Mingyuan's dark red clothes flash by, she grinned. Why does this man always wear dark red clothes? It's really flirtatious. Jingyu didn't sleep that night. Being in an unsafe place, Jingyu didn't dare to sleep peacefully. After a short nap, she kept her high tension. On this island, although it was a pirate den, the discipline here wasn't bad at all. Jingyu had been listening to the movements outside for the entire night. The patrolling people were always on time, guarding this small island. When the sky was slightly bright, this sleeping island woke up amidst the noise. Early in the morning, there was the sound of people practicing martial arts. Jingyu moved her sore body and turned over with her eyes closed. When she heard the sound of the door opening, she squinted her eyes and looked sideways. "Miss Jingyu, young master asked you to go to the front hall to eat with him." The servant girl bowed slightly to Jingyu and said with a face full of envy, "This servant will help Miss wash up. Miss is really fortunate to be able to have a meal with young master." Jingyu's face darkened. She closed her eyes again and said, "I'm not going. If you want to go, you can go by yourself." The little girl seemed to be shocked and said anxiously, "Why don't you go?" "If I don't want to go, then I won't go." Jingyu frowned in annoyance and said, "Don't disturb me. I want to sleep." "Your temper is even worse than this young master's." Just as Jingyu was about to go back to sleep, a slender figure walked into Jingyu's room. Jingyu's face darkened. She gritted her teeth and looked at a certain someone in a red dress coquettishly and said, "Don't you know etiquette? Don't randomly enter a girl's room." Jingyu looked at Yuan Mingyuan as if she wanted to eat him. Chapter 666. This young master will say it again. Is this my room? Yuan Mingyuan looked at Jingyu seriously. I will also say it again. I slept in this room, so it is my room. Jingyu sat up and calmly stared at Yuan Mingyuan. Yuan Mingyuan rubbed his eyebrows and said, "Get up quickly. I will wait for you outside and take you to see the scenery of my Ghost King cave." "Yo, so kind? Aren't you afraid that I will run away?" Jingyu looked at Yuan Mingyuan and said, "Didn't you say it?" If you want to leave, I can't stop you. Yuan Mingyuan looked sideways at Jingyu and said, since that is the case, you haven't left yet. Doesn't that mean that you don't want to leave? Since you don't want to leave, why should I stop you? Jingyu's face darkened. She stared at Yuan Mingyuan and said, what are you still standing there for? Do you want to see me change? I really wonder if you are a woman. Yuan Mingyuan's face turned slightly red. He flung his sleeves and left embarrassedly. Jingyu looked at Yuan Mingyuan's appearance and laughed out loud. This brat is actually shy, too interesting. When Jingyu finished eating and drinking, Yuan Mingyuan had almost finished drinking a pot of tea. Seeing the refreshed Jingyu, he said gloomily, are you women all so slow? Have some patience. Jingyu stretched and said, these days, those who are impatient can't get a wife. Yuan Mingyuan frowned. He was too lazy to say anything more to Jingyu. He stood up and walked forward. Jingyu shrugged slightly and followed behind Yuan Mingyuan. She watched Yuan Mingyuan greet the people on the road with a smile. He led Jingyu to the back of the mountain. The back of the mountain was full of stones. She didn't know which hole they went into, but after walking around for a while, they found a flight of stairs. This is the origin of the Ghost King Cave. Once you enter this cave, even ghosts will cry. As Yuan Mingyuan walked up the stairs, he said, there are hundreds of caves in the Ghost King's cave. I don't know how many dead ends there are, or how many entrances there are. There are simply too many people who come in and cannot leave. Every month, we can clear out countless corpses from this cave. Only the people of our Ghost King's cave can recognize the way here, Yuan Mingyuan said faintly. It's no wonder you can dominate this area of the sea. If you hide here when you run for your life, you won't have to worry about anything. Jingyu followed behind Yuan Mingyuan and laughed. Easy for you to say. Yuan Mingyuan threw out those 4 words. He didn't continue the topic. He pointed at the glowing hole in front of them and said, go up. You can reach the highest stone on the island. You can see the entirety of the Ghost King Cave from there. Jingyu nodded silently. They walked for a while before they finally saw the small hole. Yuan Mingyuan raised his hand and moved the boulder in front of the hole away. Jingyu watched Yuan Mingyuan go out, then followed him. As soon as she climbed up, she felt the sea breeze. Jingyu stood up straight and looked around. There was an endless sea around her. At this moment, she was standing on a rather tall boulder. Below her were all rocks. Standing from this position, she could see the entire island. But the strange thing was that Jingyu couldn't see where the pirate's nest was. Chapter 667. This is the cave of the Ghost King. Yuan Mingyuan stood with his hands behind his back and stood beside Jingyu. He looked at the island under the sun and said faintly, this used to be called Rock Island. It was desolate and uninhabited. The original people who lived here created the cave of the Ghost King. Then how did you get here? Jingyu sat down cross-legged, facing the sea. She raised her head slightly and asked. An accident. Yuan Mingyuan also sat down beside Jingyu. He narrowed his eyes and said, aren't you curious why I became a pirate? What's there to be curious about? Jingyu smiled faintly and said, it's good to be a pirate. It's leisurely, free, and worry-free. Haha, you're really interesting. Yuan Mingyuan said with a smile. Can you stop repeating the same thing over and over again? Isn't it boring? Jingyu rolled her eyes in disgust. She flipped her hair and looked sideways at Yuan Mingyuan. When she saw Yuan Mingyuan's silver eye mask, she frowned slightly. What happened to your eye? Jingyu looked at Yuan Mingyuan and asked, you don't look like someone who's weak in martial arts. How did someone hurt your eye? Who told you that my eye was hurt? Yuan Mingyuan heard Jingyu's question. His body trembled slightly, and then he turned his head to look at Jingyu and asked, not hurt? If you're not hurt, then why are you covering your eyes? I thought you were a one-eyed blind person. Jingyu curled her lips in disdain and said casually. However, just as Jingyu finished speaking, Yuan Mingyuan's face suddenly turned cold. Hey, I didn't mean anything else. I was just asking. Jingyu looked at Yuan Mingyuan's gloomy face and said, don't worry about me. Let's talk about the cave of the Ghost King. My eyes. Yuan Mingyuan lowered his head and reached out to touch one of his eyes. He seemed to want to say something, but he didn't want to. Jingyu opened her eyes wide and was ready to listen to the story. However, Yuan Mingyuan suddenly paused. Jingyu was very anxious. What happened to your eyes? What's wrong? Just say it. He stopped halfway through his sentence. This kind of person could be tortured to tears at any moment. Just as Jingyu was in a dilemma, Yuan Mingyuan suddenly turned to look at Jingyu and asked, "Do you want to see it?" Jingyu was stunned. She looked at Yuan Mingyuan and blinked. "What are you looking at? Look at your eyes? What's so good about her eyes?" Yuan Mingyuan lowered his hand and said faintly, "Do you know why I didn't kill you and why I saved you? Didn't you say that it's because I'm the woman that the king of hell took a fancy to?" Jingyu said calmly, "If it was just because of this, you would be in a dungeon right now. Why would I treat you so well?" Yuan Mingyuan's eyes flashed with a trace of disdain as he said faintly. Jingyu was slightly stunned. So there was another reason. "I'm keeping you here because of that arrest warrant," Yuan Mingyuan said. "So, you want to exchange me for money?" Jingyu calmly raised her eyebrows and said, "No." Yuan Mingyuan frowned and said, "Because you're wanted, everyone has the right to kill an evildoer with different pupils. It's ridiculous." Chapter 668. Ridiculous? Jingyu sat up straight and stared at Yuan Mingyuan. "That's because you haven't seen any abnormal pupils. If you had, you would have been scared away. Ha ha ha. I've seen too many people like you." "What's wrong with abnormal pupils?" Yuan Mingyuan clenched his fists and said coldly, "Are abnormal pupils really evildoers? Are they monsters? Do they have to be killed?" Jingyu was stunned. Looking at the agitated Yuan Mingyuan, she frowned. "Hey, she wasn't agitated, okay? Didn't you ask me why I'm wearing an eye mask?" Yuan Mingyuan raised his hand and touched his silver eye patch. He said lightly, "It's because this eye is different from others." "Different?" Jingyu was stunned for a moment. She watched as Yuan Mingyuan lifted his hand and untied his blindfold. His slightly lowered eyelids revealed his face, and his handsome features carried with them a trace of wickedness. Jingyu stared at Yuan Mingyuan with wide eyes. She watched with her own eyes as Yuan Mingyuan slowly opened his eyes. Beneath the blindfold, a blood-red eye stared straight at Jingyu. One eye was black, and the other was blood-red. There were even black threads running through the blood-red eye. Looking at this appearance, it seemed that Yuan Mingyuan's eye was necrotic. Jingyu's eyes were filled with fear. This was the first time she saw someone with a red eye. There was no white, only black. "Are you afraid?" Yuan Mingyuan clearly saw the fear in Jingyu's eyes. His lips curled into a cold smile and said, "That's the reason. My eye has been necrotic since I was young. Because of this eye, I was ostracized. My parents were killed, and I was called a monster on the run. In my ears, all the voices I heard were monsters. They should be killed." Yuan Mingyuan touched his eye and said, "Fortunately, I hid here and never went out." Yuan Mingyuan said, "This time, when I saw the contents of the wanted poster, it reminded me of what happened in the past. That's why I kept you here. Do you understand now? Have you never thought of revenge?" Jingyu was silent for a moment, then looked at Yuan Mingyuan and asked, "Revenge?" Yuan Mingyuan was stunned. He lowered his head and said, "You don't know how desperate I was at that time. The world spurned me, and all my family members were dead." "So what?" Jingyu stood up slightly and looked at the vast sea in the distance. She said coldly, "They died because of you, but you hide here and drag out an ignoble existence. Do you think you are worthy of their deaths? Why should I be?" Yuan Mingyuan also stood up. The two looked at each other from afar. Yuan Mingyuan said, "In order to let me live, my family members died. I did it. I'm still alive. I'm worthy of their deaths. Are you really happy to live like this? Who will avenge your family members? Who will avenge your hatred?" Jingyu's eyes were rolling. An uncontrollable anger exploded. "You haven't experienced it. How would you know me?" Yuan Mingyuan was also a little agitated. He stared at Jingyu and said, "It's just the suppression of the 9 emperors by the Emperor of Tokyo. You have the 9 emperors and the protection of the King of Hell. How would you know how difficult it is?" "Ha ha ha. Jingyu laughed out loud. She looked coldly at Yuan Mingyuan and said, "So, you don't believe that I have abnormal pupils?" Chapter 669. Is that not the case? Yuan Mingyuan looked at Jingyu with a deep gaze. Because of my different pupils, my father was brutally murdered by the Holy Family. Because of my different pupils, the person I loved became a rebel. Because of my different pupils, I became the target of everyone. I escaped from the Tokyo like a stray dog and wandered everywhere. Jingyu looked sideways at Yuan Mingyuan. She raised her hand and pointed at her own eyes. She stared at Yuan Mingyuan and said, "Look carefully. It is because of this pair of eyes that I can understand everything that you have experienced." Yuan Mingyuan's heart suddenly tightened. In Jingyu's words, he could hear an incomparably strong anger and sorrow, as well as a monstrous hatred. This feeling almost instantly stimulated a resonance that had been hidden in his body for a long time. "Do you see it clearly?" "My eyes." Jingyu looked coldly at Yuan Mingyuan. Yuan Mingyuan looked at Jingyu's pitch-black eyes in horror. Under his gaze, a pair of golden eyes slowly appeared. Those golden eyes were as fervent as a lion's. They shone brightly under the scorching sun. They were so fervent and arrogant that they carried a strong aura of a wild beast. When she looked at Yuan Mingyuan, it was as if a king had personally arrived. She was incomparably arrogant. Yuan Mingyuan's body froze on the spot. He looked at the woman standing in front of him. That pair of golden eyes were so bright that he suddenly lost all words. "Now, do you see it clearly?" Jingyu looked at Yuan Mingyuan with a faint smile and said, "I have different pupils. What you are experiencing right now is what I am experiencing right now." Yuan Mingyuan was unable to recover for a long time. "Right now, I'm bearing it, but one day in the future, I'll return it double." Jingyu looked at Yuan Mingyuan and said, "I want to avenge my father. I want the blood of my enemies to wash away my hatred. I will take back what I have lost with my own hands." "Yuan Mingyuan, what about you?" Jingyu raised her head slightly and looked at Yuan Mingyuan. She called out Yuan Mingyuan's name clearly. At this moment, Yuan Mingyuan's heart trembled violently as he looked at the woman standing under the sunlight. She was so dazzling. On this day, on top of the tall rock, the woman in black with her golden eyes entered Yuan Mingyuan's heart. He never thought that there would be such a person that would amaze him. The deadline of 3 days was fast, but it was also slow. Xiaoqin came again. This time, Xiaoqin didn't come with people. He only came with a boat. "What did you say? King Yama came with a woman?" Yuan Mingyuan walked out of the island while listening to the people around him. He suddenly frowned. "That's right. The king of hell only came with a ship and a few subordinates." The person next to him followed behind Yuan Mingyuan and asked with doubt, "Boss, could this be a trick of the king of hell?" "No." Yuan Mingyuan's heart was beating faster. He felt that something terrible was about to happen. Outside the island of the Ghost King Cave, Xiaoqin had already disembarked from the boat. He stood on the beach with his back facing Yuan Mingyuan. He squinted at the rising and falling tides of the sea without any expression. He only turned around when he heard footsteps behind him. "Where is he?" Xiaoqin narrowed his eyes and looked at Yuan Mingyuan. He frowned and looked behind Yuan Mingyuan. He didn't see a familiar figure and asked with a cold expression. Chapter 670. Where are the things you prepared? Yuan Mingyuan wasn't in a hurry as he looked at Xiaoqin and asked, "I want to see Jingyu." Xiaoqin didn't back down at all. If he didn't see Jingyu in one piece, he wouldn't give him anything. Yuan Mingyuan looked at Xiaoqin's expression and felt a little sad. 2 days ago, Jingyu's words had been so resolute. The 9 emperors were her husband and the love of her life. No matter how much you, the king of hell, went through water and tread on fire for her, you wouldn't be able to gain anything. As he thought of this, Yuan Mingyuan suddenly felt a sense of sympathy for his fellow sufferer. The expression on his face softened. He raised his hand and said to the person beside him, "Go and bring Miss Jingyu out." "Yes." The person beside him responded and turned to leave. Just as Xiaoqin was about to lose his patience, he finally saw a woman slowly walk over from afar. Her black hair was casually tied up and she was dressed in black. She walked towards Xiao Chun step by step. Seeing that familiar face, Xiao Qin's cold lips finally relaxed. His eyes burned as he looked at Jingyu, and the corners of his mouth slowly curled up. Jingyu naturally saw Xiao Qin as well. Her eyes curved, and she revealed a brilliant smile at Xiao Qin. The two of them were clearly so far apart and didn't say a single word. But that small gaze and comfortable smile made Yuan Mingyuan feel a kind of tacit understanding. This was a tacit understanding that he couldn't interfere in. This feeling caused Yuan Mingyuan's heart to fill with a strange color. King of Hell, you've seen her. What have you prepared to exchange with me? Yuan Mingyuan narrowed his eyes as he looked at Xiao Chun and asked. When Xiao Chun heard Yuan Mingyuan's words, he withdrew his gaze from Jingyu and looked indifferently at Yuan Mingyuan. He raised his hand slightly, and Xingyi nodded behind him. He walked onto the boat and brought down a woman under everyone's puzzled gazes. A delicate woman wearing an orange dress stood beside Xiao Chun in fear. She raised her eyes slightly and looked at Yuan Mingyuan. Jingyu was puzzled. Why did Xiao Chun bring a woman down? Jingyu looked sideways at Yuan Mingyuan and realized that the moment Yuan Mingyuan saw the woman, his entire body froze on the spot. His eyes were filled with disbelief. The woman also saw Yuan Mingyuan. Her eyes were first filled with shock, then joy, and then tears overflowed from her eyes. Big brother Yuan. A tentative call came from her mouth. Jingyu could clearly see Yuan Mingyuan's body fiercely shake. Liner? Yuan Mingyuan also called out a name. Woo woo woo. Brother Yuan. Tears flowed from the woman's eyes as she ran towards Yuan Mingyuan. She hugged Yuan Mingyuan tightly and cried, Brother Yuan, you are still alive. You are still alive, woo woo woo. Liner is so scared, Liner. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. Yuan Mingyuan hugged the woman tightly, his eyes filled with joy. Jingyu walked towards Xiao Chun and looked at this scene with confusion in her eyes. One person for one person. Yuan Mingyuan, the two of us don't owe each other anything. Xiao Chun looked at Jingyu from head to toe. When he saw that Jingyu was unharmed, he heaved a huge sigh of relief and turned to look at Yuan Mingyuan. Brother Yuan? The woman wiped the tears from her face and looked up at Yuan Mingyuan. Chapter 671. Thank you, King of Hell. Yuan Mingyuan looked at Xiao Chun, then at Jingyu. Finally, he spat out 2 words to Xiao Chen with a heavy heart. Xiao Chen looked up at Yuan Mingyuan. Then, he held Jingyu's hand and turned to leave. Yuan Mingyuan looked at their departing figures and paused slightly. Then, he called out, I'm afraid there will be a storm tonight. If you want to leave, you'll have to wait until tomorrow. Why don't you stay on my island for the night? That's fine. Thank you. Yuan Mingyuan looked at Xiao Chun with some hesitation. Then, he pursed his lips and added, Miss Jingyu, what do you think? Jingyu was slightly taken aback. She looked up at Xiao Chun and then looked up at the sky. The sky was indeed covered with layers of clouds. It was obvious that it was going to rain. It was indeed not safe to go out to sea on a rainy day. With this thought in mind, Jingyu looked at Xiao Chun with a questioning gaze. Ninth brother, since this young hero has invited us, why don't we accept his invitation? When Qinggu heard that there was going to be a storm, he immediately became excited and nervous. Last time, he almost lost half his life. Before Xiao Chun could say anything, he quickly jumped out and said, That's great. Let's go and see what the place Ninth Ant has been staying at for the past few days looks like. When Qinggu saw that Xiao Chun was not speaking, he was afraid that Xiao Chun would reject him. Thus, he quickly said, Yes, sir. Xiao Chun was originally a little hesitant. However, when he heard Qingji's words, his eyes narrowed slightly and he agreed. He raised his chin slightly and looked at Yuan Mingyuan. Then, I'll have to trouble you. Please. Yuan Mingyuan politely stepped aside and welcomed Xiao Qian and the others into the Ghost King cave. Since it was Yuan Mingyuan who personally welcomed them, the pirates naturally had no objections. Everyone on the island started a fire to cook and serve them with good wine and meat. In the island's main hall, everyone sat together. Jingyu finally knew who that woman was. It turned out to be Yuan Mingyuan's half-sister, Wan Lin Er. She had been separated from Yuan Mingyuan many years ago and hadn't seen each other for 5 or 6 years. At this moment, the two of them were sitting at the side, chatting endlessly. Jingyu looked at the two of them and blinked slightly. He looked up at Xiao Qian and asked, "How do you know that this person is Yuan Mingyuan's sister? Do you know each other?" "We have a history." Xiao Qian looked at Yuan Mingyuan with narrowed eyes and said, "Back then, Yuan Mingyuan was said to be a monster and was hunted by many major forces. The Nether sect was one of them." "Huh, the Nether sect was involved as well?" Jing Yu's eyes widened when she heard this. She looked at Xiao Qian with a shocked expression. Although those with different pupils are said to be monsters, there are also other rumors. They talk about how powerful those with different pupils are, and how those with different pupils can dominate the world if they can get their hands on them. Xiao Qian raised his body slightly and looked at Jingyu from the side. He said, "Who wouldn't be tempted by such rumors? If the Nether sect doesn't snatch and kill those with different pupils, we'll be the next ones to be destroyed and hunted down. No wonder Yuan Mingyuan hates you so much." Jingyu pursed her lips and said, "This is karma?" Xiao Qian's expression froze slightly when he heard this. While Jingyu and Xiao Qian were talking, Yuan Mingyuan and Wenlin walked over. "King of Hell, my lord." Wenlin Er's eyes were red as she bowed slightly at Xiao Qian. It was obvious that she had been crying. Chapter 672. At that moment, Yuan Mingyuan looked at Xiao Qian with a much gentler gaze. He sat down beside Xiao Qian and Jingyu. "Brother Yuan, it was this official who saved me and prevented me from falling into the brothel." Wenlin looked at Xiao Qian gratefully and held Yuan Mingyuan's hand as she spoke seriously. "Yes." Yuan Mingyuan raised his hand and patted Wenlin Er's head. From Wenlin Er's mouth, he learned that after they had been separated for so many years, Wenlin had grown up in the homes of many relatives. She didn't expect that a small official would take a fancy to her. He wanted to force her to be his concubine, but Wenlin did not agree. She ran away in the night and headed in the direction of Yangzhou. She was cheated of all her traveling expenses and was even sold to the brothel. Fortunately, she was beautiful and was not beaten or scolded. She was supposed to receive guests yesterday. The disheartened Wenlin was prepared to die, but she was saved by Xiao Qian. She learned about Yuan Mingyuan from Xiao Qian and followed him. "Brother Yuan, this official said that you stole his wife. He said that he wanted to use Lin to redeem his wife." Wenlin looked at Yuan Mingyuan with a wronged expression and said, "Brother Yuan, how could you steal someone else's wife?" "Silly girl, Big Brother is just playing around with this lord." Yuan Mingyuan's expression froze. He smiled and patted Wenlin Er's head as he said, "You guys, isn't his wife sitting beside him right now?" "Madam, did Brother Yuan do anything to you? If he bullies you, you must bully him back." Only then did Wenlin Er's gaze fall on Jingyu. She looked at Jingyu with a sincere expression. "I'm fine. Your brother Yuan is very polite to me." Jingyu smiled at Wenlin in a friendly manner. "So you're the official's wife. Madam, you're really beautiful." Wenlin blinked and looked at Jingyu happily. Her eyes were filled with envy, and her words made Jingyu's eyes twitch. She did not know why, but she felt a chill down her spine when she was praised. "When Lin grows up, she will definitely be prettier than me," Jingyu said to Wenlin. "Really?" Wenlin eyes brightened, and she said happily, "When I grow up, I must marry a man who looks like him." Wenlin spoke very seriously, but there was no emotion in her eyes. There was only gratitude. When she looked at Jingyu and Xiao Qian with her eyes filled with envy and anticipation, her words made everyone was stunned. "Why do you want to marry a man like him?" Jingyu asked in confusion. "Because he is a good person." Wenlin said seriously, "Madam, you are so lucky to be doing your best to save your wife. When Lin grows up, I want to be as happy as you." "Haha, a good person." Jingyu laughed when she heard Wenlin say that he was a good person. She looked at Xiao Qian with a scrutinizing gaze and looked at Xiao Qian from head to toe. She could not see how Xiao Qian looked like a good person. "You are." Xiao Qian's face stiffened when Jingyu looked at him. His face darkened, and he called out Jingyu's name gloomily. "Cough, cough." Cough. It's nothing. Jingyu coughed and looked at Lin with arched eyebrows. If that's the case, Lin must grow up quickly. Otherwise, how can I meet a good man like him? Chapter 673. Jingyu deliberately emphasized the words good man. That strange flavor caused Yuan Mingyuan's lips to curl up as he listened from the side. Aya, this Ghost King's cave is really strange. I can't even find the way. While everyone was talking, Qinggu, who couldn't stand to be idle, also came back excitedly. The moment he entered, he started chattering away. Regarding Qingji's habit of being familiar with everyone, Qinggu didn't care. Jingyu was speechless. Yuan Mingyuan politely invited Xiao Chun and the others to rest in the Ghost King's cave. At night, the heavy rain really did come down. Jingyu stood under the eaves and watched the heavy rain wash the rocks. The muddy water flowed down the ditch. She could almost hear the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks. That sound was so pleasant to the ears. Jingyu stood under the eaves in a daze. Suddenly, a pair of hands wrapped around Jingyu from behind and pulled her into an embrace. The familiar smell and broad chest made Jingyu's body pause for a moment. Then, she raised her head slightly and leaned on Xiao Chun. What are you looking at? You're so engrossed. Xiao Chun narrowed his eyes and rubbed Jingyu's cheek as he asked, Nothing. I'm just listening to the sound of the waves. Jingyu relaxed her body and leaned on Xiao Chun. She closed her eyes and felt Xiao Chun's heartbeat and breathing. Did you calculate that Yuan Mingyuan wouldn't do anything to you? Xiao Chun tightened his arms around Jingyu and said in Jingyu's ear, If not, why would you be so heartless and push me away at the bottom of the sea? Xiao Chun. Jingyu's heart trembled slightly. She turned around and looked at Xiao Chun's face, which was terrifyingly calm. I almost thought I lost you. Xiao Chun tightened his arms around Jingyu. His dark eyes were so frightening. Jingyu pursed her lips and didn't say anything. Do you think that everything will be fine as long as I'm alive? Xiao Chun raised his hand and rubbed Jingyu's cheek. If I lose you, how do you expect me to live? Xiao Chun. Jingyu's heart trembled violently. Because of Xiao Chun's words, her eyes were filled with shock. She looked up at Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun looked at Jingyu and said, If I were you, would you be willing to push me away? No. Jingyu suddenly tightened her grip on Xiao Chun's hand and refused without thinking. As soon as she said this, Jingyu was stunned. Since she wasn't willing, how could she think that Xiao Chun was willing? Do you understand? Xiao Chun held Jingyu's cheek and asked with narrowed eyes. Jingyu looked at Xiao Chun. The corners of her mouth curled up and she nodded. This man was always like this. He didn't say anything, but he seemed to say everything. Life and death together really wasn't something that could be said. Jingyu could almost clearly feel it. If she really died, Xiao Chun would definitely destroy the Ghost King's cave at all costs and come to accompany her. What a foolish man. Xiao Chun. Jingyu looked up and called out Xiao Chun's name. Xiao Chun responded. Jingyu just smiled and didn't say anything. It seemed that she just wanted to call out Xiao Chun's name. Xiao Chun's eyes softened slightly. He bent down and planted a kiss on Jingyu's lips. When he was about to let go, Jingyu raised her hand and took the initiative to wrap it around Xiao Chun's neck. Outside the house, it was pouring rain. Under the eaves, the rain was dripping. Chapter 674. Inside the house, the two of them kissed passionately and were so intimate and harmonious. Yuan Mingyuan, who was standing in the corner not far away, stood there quietly for who knows how long. The rain seemed to have soaked his clothes. He quietly watched the two of them talk. Every action and every expression was so harmonious. Jingyu's kiss made Yuan Mingyuan's hand, which was hanging by his side, tighten slightly. In the end, he slowly lowered his head. The servant girl standing beside Yuan Mingyuan saw this scene and turned to look at Yuan Mingyuan. In the end, she sighed deeply. Young master, aren't you a pirate? Why didn't you snatch her? The servant girl looked at Yuan Mingyuan with a conflicted expression and asked, Why should I snatch her? Yuan Mingyuan was slightly taken aback. His clenched fists silently relaxed. At this moment, his heart seemed to beat abnormally for a moment. Young master, don't you like that girl? The servant girl said with hidden bitterness. Since you like her, why don't you just snatch her? You've already gotten her, yet you're giving her back. That's really not the style of a pirate leader. Huh? Yuan Mingyuan laughed softly. He turned his head slightly and looked at Jing Yu's back with a deep gaze. A strange feeling arose in his chest. He said faintly, not everything can be snatched. Even if you snatch it, it doesn't mean it's yours. Since I've already snatched her, she's naturally mine. Isn't that so? The servant girl said with confusion. Let's go. Yuan Mingyuan lowered his head slightly and didn't say anything else. He turned and left. The servant girl's face was still filled with confusion. She couldn't understand her young master's thoughts. She silently followed behind Yuan Mingyuan and left. The night was dark. The heavy rain continued for the entire first half of the night. It finally stopped in the second half of the night. Jingyu was annoyed by the sound of the rain and couldn't fall asleep at all. Finally, in the second half of the night, the rain stopped. Only then did Jingyu feel sleepy. Just as Jingyu was about to fall asleep in a daze, the originally quiet island was suddenly filled with hurried whistles, followed by the sound of gongs and drums. Jingyu opened her eyes slightly. The quiet island was suddenly filled with noise. The army is attacking the island. The army is attacking the island. The shouts and the sounds of gongs and drums caused Jingyu to sit up abruptly. Xiaochen also got up. His expression was slightly cold. He quickly put on his clothes and strode to the door to open it. Two guests. The young master has already left the island. The army is attacking. Please calm down. The servant girl standing in front of the door seemed to be about to knock on the door. She had just raised her hand when she saw Xiaochen open the door. She took a step back and bowed to speak. Xiaochen replied indifferently. Seeing Jingyu walking over after putting on her clothes, he turned to the servant girl and said, We're leaving the island? But the young master said. The servant girl frowned, but when she saw Xiaoqin's cold expression, her body trembled and she bowed and said, I'll find someone to bring you out. Thank you. Jingyu stood beside Xiaoqian and nodded slightly to the servant girl in thanks. Everyone on the island was busy. Countless figures stepped into the muddy pool and headed in a direction with all kinds of swords in their hands. They were clearly so weak, but at this moment, they displayed an incomparably strong spirit, shaking everyone's heart. Shouting one after another, Jingyu, who was standing on the side, couldn't help but feel her heart burning. Yuan Mingyuan, your people are very good. Xiao Chun slightly retracted his gaze and looked at Yuan Mingyuan indifferently as he said, Nonsense, if my people aren't good, then would your people be good? Yuan Mingyuan quite bluntly retorted Xiao Chun. He looked at the approaching ships. One ship slowly sailed over, seemingly preparing to negotiate first. Young Master Yuan, long time no see. The person standing at the bow of the ship was quite burly and wore armor. He slightly raised his head to look at Yuan Mingyuan, who was standing high above, and raised his hand to cup his hand slightly. Chapter 676. I was wondering who it was. So it's General Lei. Yuan Mingyuan clearly knew this person. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he replied in a clear voice, looking at this posture, General Lei wants to flatten my Ghost King cave. After all, we've been fighting here for several years. Does Great General Lei not plan to show mercy today? Ha ha ha. Whether or not I show mercy depends on young Master Yuan. The person called General Lei roared in a rough voice, Young Master Yuan, I heard that the criminal that the Imperial Court wants to arrest has run to your Ghost King cave. If you can hand over the criminal, this general guarantees that he won't touch your Ghost King cave in the slightest. Criminal of the Imperial Court? I think, General Lei, you're mistaken, right? Everyone in my Ghost King cave is from my Ghost King cave. Yuan Mingyuan laughed and said, General Lei must be mistaken. Yuan Mingyuan, don't play tricks with me. The person I want to capture is the woman standing beside you. Because of Yuan Mingyuan's words, General Lei's face darkened slightly as he said coldly, If you want the people of my Ghost King cave to go with you, General Lei, you still have to show some ability. Yuan Mingyuan stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at General Lei with a faint smile and said, "Brothers, send our General Lei back?" "All right." As soon as Yuan Mingyuan's voice fell, a few heads suddenly popped out from the originally calm surface of the lake. They uniformly surrounded General Lei's boat. What do you want to do?" General Lei looked at the person soaking in the water and immediately became nervous. His face flushed red as he looked at Yuan Mingyuan and angrily shouted, "Yuan Mingyuan, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. That woman is a monster. If we don't kill her, the world will be in chaos." "Ha ha ha. What a great world in chaos." Jingyu laughed heartily as she strode out and stood beside Yuan Mingyuan. She looked at General Lei indifferently and said, "Turn around and look behind you. Who is the person who is stirring up the wind and stirring up a war? Let me tell you, even if the world is in chaos, it will be because of you." Jingyu stood coldly on top of the boulder. Her pitch-black eyes instantly turned dark green. Those green eyes were dazzling in the dark night. The people have no way of making a living, and the people are plunged into misery and suffering. It was you who ignited the flames of war. My hands have not been stained with the blood of the people. Jingyu looked at those people coldly. Her words were powerful and resonant. Everyone stared at Jingyu with their eyes wide open. Yuan Mingyuan looked at Jingyu, who was standing beside him, in shock. He stared at her wolf-like eyes for a long time, unable to return to his senses. Demon! Demon! General Lei, who was standing on the boat, saw the change in Jingyu's eyes clearly. He was so scared that his face turned pale, and he couldn't even stand steadily on the boat. "Humph, good for nothing." Jingyu spat out these 3 words in disdain. Yuan Mingyuan raised his hand slightly. The person waiting in the sea received Yuan Mingyuan's order and quickly dived into the sea without hesitation. He shook General Lei's boat vigorously in the water. Aya! Splash! General Lei's huge body fell into the water under the violent shaking, creating a rather high splash. "Ha ha ha! A drowning dog! Ha 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 ha! Dog Lei is going home to find his mother." Chapter 677. Wave after wave of mocking laughter rang out. General Lei was flustered as he drank a few mouthfuls of water. Only then did he wretchedly swim in the direction of the large group of ships. Yuan Mingyuan's side laughed incessantly as they sent out a small boat to escort General Lei back. Since the negotiation didn't succeed, the next step was naturally the battle. Yuan Mingyuan was indeed the head of the pirates. His methods of fighting were endless. He didn't play by the rules at all. Just when you thought he would do something like that, he didn't do it. The pirates fought with incomparable difficulty, but their curses didn't decrease at all. The curses that came out of their mouths almost angered the opposing army to death. They were quite happy, but in the end, they were outnumbered. The number of injured people that were carried back increased rapidly. "Use fire." Jingyu was silent for a moment before saying indifferently, "No, our arrows can't shoot that far. We can shoot at the front row of ships, but it's completely useless." They extinguished it in the blink of an eye. After Jingyu finished speaking, Yuan Mingyuan didn't say anything. The one standing below Yuan Mingyuan spoke first. "That means we have to find a way to ignite it instantly," Jingyu said with a slight frown. Looking at the water monkeys that dived into the water to kill people, she suddenly thought of an idea. "You guys are quite good in the water, aren't you? To be able to drag someone back from so far away without needing to breathe," Jingyu said as she pointed at the person below. "That's right. These are all monkeys in our hands. No one can beat them in the water." When that person heard Jingyu's question, he immediately puffed out his chest proudly and said, "If it weren't for these water monkeys, how could we dominate this part of the sea?" "I have an idea." Jingyu nodded with satisfaction and said, "Go take out all the wine on our island and let those water monkeys take it. Dive into the water and throw the wine jar onto a ship. Throw it onto any ship, the more the better." That person was slightly stunned and looked at Jingyu with a puzzled expression. Finally, his gaze landed on Yuan Mingyuan. "Do as she says." Yuan Mingyuan looked up slightly at Jingyu and nodded slightly. Okay. That person hesitated for a moment, but then gritted his teeth and agreed. He immediately shouted loudly and called a large group of people to carry the wine. Since they were going to throw it onto the ship, the wine jar naturally couldn't be too big, and ropes had to be hung to make it convenient for one person to carry a few. These people were also smart. Jingyu looked at those who were good at swimming. Each of them had 4 jars of wine hanging around their necks. It was effortless for them to swim. Some of the weaker ones carried 2 jars. Then, they dove into the water and swam towards the ship. Bring the arrows. 2 longbows were brought over. Jingyu and Xiao Qin looked at each other and smiled faintly. It's close to dawn and the fog is very thick. You can't see the ship clearly. Let me light up the ship and you shoot the arrows. Jingyu tilted her head slightly and looked at Xiao Qin. With your ability, it should be more than enough, right? Yes. Xiao Qin nodded indifferently. I'll do it too. Yuan Mingyuan also picked up a bow. Jinglang and Xingyi also picked up their bows and said, we can't shoot those that are too far away, but we can shoot those that are closer. Chapter 678. All right, light the fire. A few people lifted the brazier and the arrows that they had prepared beforehand lit the brazier. Jingyu raised her longbow. Under everyone's gaze, Jingyu stood with her bow drawn. Her green eyes stared coldly in front of her. Jingyu could almost ignore the darkness of the night. In her eyes, she could clearly see the people in the water poking their heads out and throwing the wine jars in their hands onto the ships. Jingyu watched as the wine jars were thrown onto the ships and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Under everyone's fervent gazes, the flaming arrows mixed with the cold air pierced through the ships in front of them and nailed themselves onto the ship that had just thrown the wine jars. The flames landed on the wine and lit it up. The moment the flames started burning, Xiao Qin's arrows followed suit. Yuan Mingyuan and Xing Yi were naturally not weak. One arrow after another flew past. In an instant, dozens of ships on the sea were set ablaze. Jingyu's eyes flashed with a golden light as though she was not tired. One arrow after another was shot. Every arrow that Jingyu shot out was set ablaze. Towards the end, Interrogation Officer 1 and Jinglang both felt a little tired and stopped to rest. However, Jingyu didn't stop at all. Her action of raising her hand to shoot the arrow didn't even tremble. Yuan Mingyuan's heart was filled with shock. His arm was already aching. After enduring for a long time, he was finally defeated. In the end, only Xiao Qin and Jingyu were left. Every arrow that Jingyu shot out, Xiao Qin's arrow would follow suit. There was no deviation at all. The 2 people standing on the high platform shooting arrows caused the hearts of the people below to palpitate. Finally, when nearly 100 ships had been set ablaze, Jingyu slowly put down her hands. She raised her hand to wipe the sweat on her forehead and said, "Let's rest for a while. Let's continue." Okay, Xiao Qin responded and put down the bow in his hand. He raised his hand to hold Jingyu's hand and gently massaged it. Xiao Qin helped Jingyu massage for a long time. Jingyu also raised Xiao Qin's hand and helped Xiao Qin massage. The 2 looked at each other and smiled. This harmonious action was so familiar that it was as if they had done it dozens of times. Yuan Mingyuan looked at Jingyu and Xiao Qin, and his heart skipped a beat. He tilted his head and saw that the people were trying their best to put out the fire. They raised their hands to raise their bows and arrows and began a new round of shooting. The ships were very close together. A gust of wind blew the fire to the ships next to them. Even if they wanted to put out the fire, they were powerless. They helplessly jumped down and prepared to escape. However, they didn't know that if they jumped down, what awaited them was an even more merciless massacre. The water monkey, who was waiting under the water, was already itching. As long as it saw someone fall into the water, it would go up and stab them. The sea was almost dyed red with blood. The gray horizon was faintly white. The battle in the second half of the night was finally coming to an end. Jingyu's plan was successful. She successfully made the army retreat temporarily. When the sun was completely up, the navy finally sounded the sound of the retreat. The The people in Ghost King Cave cheered enthusiastically. The injured people looked at the navy leaving in a grandiose manner. They didn't seem to have regained their senses. They didn't expect that with just a few people, they would be able to beat back 500 ships. Now that they thought about it, it felt like a dream. Chapter 679. When they heard one person's cheers, they cheered enthusiastically. Jingyu stood on the high platform and heard their cheers. Looking at the mighty army leaving, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. Yuan Mingyuan looked at Jingyu with a different look in his eyes. Jingyu didn't notice it at all. She looked at Xiao Chun and smiled. This intimate action, this enviable tacit understanding, all of this fell into Yuan Mingyuan's eyes. He tilted his head and shouted out to everyone to clean up the battlefield. He personally went down to comfort the wounded, and everyone returned to the island to rest for a while. Jingyu and Xiao Chun washed up and rested for a while before heading to the front hall. Everyone was sitting in the hall. Yuan Mingyuan was talking to Wan Lin. When he saw Xiao Chun and Jingyu come in, he looked up and greeted them with a smile. How is the situation now? Jingyu didn't want to talk nonsense with Yuan Mingyuan and asked directly. The situation is not very good. Yuan Mingyuan sat up straight and looked at everyone. He said, although Lei Zhang retreated this morning, this is definitely not the end. It is just the beginning. I just received news that Jingyu, the news that you were in the Ghost King cave, has been leaked. Now everyone is coming for you. You mean, the people from the other 3 countries are also on the move? Jingyu narrowed her eyes and asked coldly, I haven't gotten the exact news from the other 3 countries, but the Jianghu is in an uproar. People from all sects and clans are flocking to Yangzhou. Among them, there are many people from hidden clans. Yuan Mingyuan said faintly, we can't hide in the Ghost King cave now. What do you plan to do next? Yuan Mingyuan looked at Jingyu and Xiao Chun and asked. Hearing this, Jingyu was slightly taken aback. She turned her head and looked at Xiao Chun. Then Jingyu frowned and said, in the end, I am the one who has implicated your Ghost King cave. How about this? You hand me over and leave, and don't interfere in this matter again. Jingyu. As soon as Jingyu finished speaking, Yuan Mingyuan's expression suddenly changed. He looked at Jingyu with burning eyes and called out Jingyu's name in an extremely deep tone. Jingyu was slightly stunned. She looked at Yuan Mingyuan, not knowing what to say. Have you forgotten? You and I are the same kind of people. Yuan Mingyuan took a deep breath and pointed at the eye mask he was wearing. I'm tired of wearing this thing. I don't want to wear it anymore. As he spoke, Yuan Mingyuan raised his hand and took off the eye mask. His blood-red eye looked straight at Jingyu and said, with my current appearance, even if you really leave, do you think they will let me go? Huh. Jingyu was amused by Yuan Mingyuan's shameless behavior. She said quite happily, so, you are now asking for my protection? Yes. Yuan Mingyuan calmly raised his eyebrows and smiled. Jingyu heard Yuan Mingyuan's calm response. Her lips curled into a faint smile. She helplessly shook her head and said, you could have lived a carefree life here. Why do you have to get involved in this? Yuan Mingyuan, if you step into this, you will not only face life and death. Didn't you ask me if I would be happy living like this? Now I can tell you, before I met you, I never thought about this question. Now that I think about it, I am not happy at all. Chapter 680. Yuan Mingyuan looked deeply at Jingyu and said, hatred and unwillingness have been suppressed in my heart for too long. Jingyu, are you willing to help me take revenge and resolve this hatred? Yuan Mingyuan's eyes shined as he looked at Jingyu. The words he spat out stunned everyone present. Hatred needs to be taken with my own hands. Jingyu raised her chin slightly and said, only then can my hatred be resolved. If that's the case, then let's go. Jingyu stood up and looked at everyone as she said, I want to go to the Roman forest. That is where our battlefield will be. My companions have already gone to the Roman forest to wait for me. Okay, I'll go with you. Yuan Mingyuan's eyes lit up and he said with a smile, no. Jingyu raised her voice to refuse. Yuan Mingyuan's mouth immediately froze. Didn't they just say that they wanted to go together? Why did Jingyu change her mind in the blink of an eye? Everyone looked at Jingyu in confusion. Only Xiao Chun calmly raised his eyebrows and smiled slightly. Okay, you can't go with us. Xiao Chun also stood up and said, You have to hand us over? No, you have to hand me over. Jingyu looked up at Xiao Chun and said calmly. Xiao Chun's hand paused slightly when he heard this. Then his face instantly turned cold. He looked at Jingyu with a cold gaze and his heart jumped. He quickly comforted her and said, This is only a scheme. A scheme. I can escape from the hands of those people, and you have to use the identity of the enemy to cover your tracks and go to the Roman forest. No, I'll go with you. Xiao Chun looked at Jingyu and said, Xiao Chun. Jingyu frowned and stared at Xiao Chun and said, You know me. I won't act recklessly. No. Xiao Chun was determined not to allow Jingyu to act alone. He raised his hand and took off the mask on his face, revealing his handsome features. He raised his hand and threw the mask into Xing Yi's arms. Then, he looked at Jingyu with a pair of black eyes and said, This way, I can go with you? You. Yuan Mingyuan's eyes instantly widened. He looked at Xiao Chun in shock. Jingyu looked at Xiao Chun's actions. She wanted to stop him, but she was powerless. For a moment, she was annoyed. She glared at Xiao Chun and said, Now that your identity has been exposed, how are you going to deceive those people? They know that the king of the Hell King of the sect has come to this island. How are you going to deceive them? They know that those people know. They know that the king of the Hell King of the sect has come to this island. What are you going to do when they see? Don't we still have Xing Yi? Xiao Chun calmly turned his gaze to Xing Yi and said, No one has seen the king of Hell's face before. If Xing Yi wears the mask, who will be able to recognize him? Master, Xing Yi called out to Xiao Chun in an aggrieved manner. However, Xiao Chun shot him a sharp look. Xing Yi was immediately speechless. If that's the case, then let's do it. Jingyu spread her hands and said, When the next wave of people comes, Yuan Mingyuan, hand me and Xiao Chun over. Make sure to put on a good show so that they will lower their guard against you. Then, take Big Brother and the others to the Roman forest through another path. Xiao Chun and I will meet up with you. Is this really okay? Yuan Mingyuan asked with a frown, somewhat uneasy. Don't worry, I have my ways. Jingyu looked up at Xiao Chun and said, Besides, don't I have Xiao Chun to protect me? Yuan Mingyuan narrowed his eyes and looked deeply at Xiao Chun as he said, I really didn't expect the king of the Hell King of the sect to be the 9 emperors. Chapter 681. You already guessed it, didn't you? Xiao Chun calmly raised his eyebrows and looked at Yuan Mingyuan as he spoke. I only dared to guess. Yuan Mingyuan faintly smiled and said, It's really surprising that it's confirmed. Xiao Chun faintly smiled and didn't say anything. Only now did Yuan Mingyuan understand why Jingyu said that she loved the 9 emperors, but was so close to the king of hell. It even made Yuan Mingyuan think that Jingyu was two-timing. Fell in love with 2 people at the same time? It turned out that he was thinking too much. The person Jingyu loved from the beginning was Xiao Chun. Everyone sat in a circle and discussed the next route and the things they needed to prepare. Yuan Mingyuan had subordinates, and with so many people, not everyone was willing to follow Yuan Mingyuan. Those who had families to feed were powerless even if they wanted to. Yuan Mingyuan still had a lot of things to do, and Jingyu and Xiao Chun were discussing how to escape if they were really handed over. The two discussed many methods, but they didn't personally see the surrounding environment, and there were too many uncertain factors. So the two of them only thought about it and didn't think too much about it. 2 days of preparation was too rushed. On the 3rd day, the retreating navy attacked again, but this time it wasn't just the army. On the island of the Ghost King Cave, Jingyu and Xiao Qian stood on a high platform and looked at the fleet coming from afar with slightly frowns. I'm afraid the situation is not good. Yuan Mingyuan quickly walked over and said, According to the news, the people who came to attack the Ghost King Cave this time aren't just the Tokyo military. Many factions of the Jianghu are also involved. Originally, the factions of the Jianghu weren't allowed to interfere, but because the Hades sect's people are involved, and some people say that the sect leader of the Hades sect took away the person with the other eye, the factions of the Jianghu forcefully intervened. If the people in the imperial court don't allow it, I'm afraid there will be an internal conflict between the imperial court and the Jianghu. When Jingyu heard Yuan Mingyuan's words, her lips curled into a mocking smile as she said, "If there really is a fight, then we won't have to worry." Just as the two factions were about to fight, the hidden clan's people showed up. It is said that the people's poisons this time are the poison sect's people, and the factions of the Jianghu came together. Are we still going to continue with the plan? Yuan Mingyuan clasped his hands behind his back as he looked at Jingyu and Xiao Chun. He said, "This is far too dangerous. Why don't we think of another plan?" "It's too late." Jingyu looked at the approaching ships and said, "Let's proceed according to the original plan." This, Yuan Mingyuan frowned slightly. He was about to say something when Xiao Chun said, "This is the best plan. Don't worry about me and Jingyu." Jingyu raised her head to look at Xiao Chun. She curved her eyebrows and smiled, then walked toward the island. The show had just begun. In less than a quarter of an hour, the ships were already approaching the island of Ghost King Cave. Yuan Mingyuan could see them clearly from his high platform. This time, there were many chivalrous men dressed in casual clothes and wielding long swords on the ships. These were the people of the Jianghu. The ones standing on the ships in the middle were all dressed in black and red. Clearly, they were the poison sect. Chapter 682. Yuan Mingyuan stood with his hands behind his back as he watched the boat slowly approach the Ghost King Cave. This time, the people who came were not from the military, but from the Jianghu. It would be impossible for Yuan Mingyuan to not recognize this person. The person standing at the bow of the boat was dressed in a green brocade robe. He had a long sword in his hand, and his entire body emitted an aura of righteousness. He raised his head and looked straight into Yuan Mingyuan's eyes. This person was the Villa Lord of the Fallen Moon Villa, Qin Shengtian. "Young Master Yuan, long time no see. How have you been?" Qin Shengtian cupped his hands politely towards Yuan Mingyuan. His chivalrous demeanor was fully displayed. As the Villa Lord of the Fallen Moon Villa, Qin Shengtian had been the Wulian Alliance for 3 consecutive terms. He had quite a reputation in the Jianghu and was extremely righteous. His friends were all over the world. If it weren't for Qin Shengtian, how could the Jianghu be so stable? Anyone who heard Qin Shengtian's name would give him some face. Villa Lord Qin. Yuan Mingyuan cupped his hands towards Qin Shengtian and said indifferently, "How come Villa Lord Qin has the time to wander around my Ghost King Cave today? You even brought so many people with you." "My Ghost King Cave is too small and can't accommodate so many people." "Young Master Yuan, I won't speak in code with you." "Young Master Yuan, don't talk nonsense. Today, I came for the person with the different pupils. I hope young Master Yuan can give me some face and teach him. My friends will definitely not make things difficult for the people of your Ghost King Cave." Qin Shengtian raised his hand slightly and said, "The person with the different pupils is a person who will bring disaster to the country. Young Master Yuan, don't help the evildoer." "Villa Lord Qin, are you here to reason with me or to threaten me?" Yuan Mingyuan's complexion chilled. He opened his mouth and said, "You brought so many people and didn't reveal anything. You didn't even say a word before bringing an army to bear down on us. I didn't know that your Falling Moon Villa had become the Imperial Court's lackeys." Yuan Mingyuan's words were obviously filled with hostility. His tone was also that of a bandit leader, causing Qin Tiancheng to frown slightly. "I don't have anything to say to you. You were the ones who offended me first. Lei Zhang and I are mortal enemies, and he brought people to attack us. Even if this young master catches the person with the other pupils, I won't hand him over." Yuan Mingyuan's unreasonable appearance caused Qin Shengtian to be slightly surprised. "Young Master Yuan, what do you mean? In the battle 2 days ago, it was only because the leader was General Lei that you didn't care about anything else?" Qin Shengtian asked in a strange tone. Of course, When have I ever lowered my head in front of Dogley? Yuan Mingyuan proudly raised his chin and said, "Moreover, this young master only thought that this person with strange pupils was beautiful, so I captured her. I didn't think that I would catch a scourge and bring her back, causing so many of my brothers to die." Bah! Qin Chengtian's expression became even more strange. He finally understood now. So Yuan Mingyuan wanted to snatch that girl to be his wife? But who would have thought that he would accidentally snatch the person with the other pupils? He. Misunderstanding. This is all a misunderstanding, Qin Chengtian said to Yuan Mingyuan. From what I see, young Master Yuan, you've been intending to hand this girl over for a long time? Villa Lord Qin, you want me to hand her over just like that? Aren't you taking my Ghost King cave too lightly? Chapter 683. Yuan Mingyuan's lips curled into a cold smile as he said, "Don't think that just because you have more people, the people of the Ghost King cave are easy to bully. If you want to take someone from my hands, I'll bite off a piece of your flesh. Do you really think that the Ghost King cave doesn't exist? Young Master Yuan, don't worry. I have no intention of becoming enemies with the Ghost King cave." Qin Shengtian waved his hand and said, "Since we've come, we naturally come with sincerity." Sincerity? Yuan Mingyuan pointed at the fleet not far away and said with disdain, "Is this the sincerity you speak of? Bringing tens of thousands of soldiers to the Ghost King cave. How come I don't see the slightest bit of sincerity?" Young Master Yuan, as long as you say the word, I can guarantee that these soldiers will all retreat. Moreover, I won't disrespect the Ghost King cave in the slightest. Qin Chengtian looked at the ships behind him and cursed in his heart, but on the surface, he was quite polite as he spoke. "I just don't know if young Master Yuan is willing to hand over the person with the other eye?" Qin Chengtian narrowed his eyes as he looked at Yuan Mingyuan. "Villa Master Qin, I spent so much effort to capture this person. If I obediently hand her over just because you talk, how do you expect me to lead my subordinates in the future? They'll think that I, Yuan Mingyuan, am afraid of the people of the Fallen Moon Villa," Yuan Mingyuan said with a cold face. After Yuan Mingyuan's words, Qin Shengtian finally understood that Yuan Mingyuan was bargaining with him. Bartering was truly the way of a bandit leader. "Ha ha ha, young Master Yuan misunderstands." Qin Shengtian laughed loudly and said, "This person with the other eye is a criminal of the imperial court. Since young Master Yuan captured her, of course the imperial court's reward will not be lacking." Villa Master Qin is indeed a sensible person. I was waiting for you to say that. Yuan Mingyuan's eyes lit up when he heard this. He laughed loudly and said, "However, in order to capture this woman, I lost so many brothers. If the imperial court doesn't reward me more, wouldn't it be unreasonable?" Qin Chengtian's face darkened when he heard Yuan Mingyuan's words. However, on the surface, he said with a smile, "Of course. As long as young Master Yuan is willing to hand over the person, the reward will definitely not displease young Master Yuan." "Ha ha ha, good." Yuan Mingyuan laughed heartily. He pointed at Qin Chengtian and said, "This young master likes straightforward people like you." However, a few nights ago, this young Master Yuan Mingyuan's people. Yuan Mingyuan's tone changed slightly. He looked at Qin Chengtian mysteriously and said, "Villa Master Qin, why don't you guess who this person is? You caught another one?" Qin Chengtian immediately understood what Yuan Mingyuan meant. He took it that Yuan Mingyuan wanted to use this opportunity to extort the imperial court's reward. His face turned cold as he said, "Young Master Yuan, don't try to fool me by catching some poacher." "Ha ha ha, young Master Qin, let's talk about it when you see the person." Yuan Mingyuan was clearly very excited. He smiled at Qin Chengtian and waved his hand, saying loudly, "Men, bring him here for this young master." Qin Chengtian's face was filled with confusion. Looking at Yuan Mingyuan's appearance, he thought to himself, could it be that he really caught some incredible person? Following Yuan Mingyuan's shout, two people were brought out from the cave not far away. It was a man and a woman. Their clothes were somewhat tattered, and there were faint traces of blood. Both of them were wearing hoods and were roughly dragged over by two pirates. Chapter 684. Qin Shengtian looked at the two people brought in and looked at Yuan Mingyuan with some doubt. Yuan Mingyuan seemed very proud. He raised his hand and said, "Take off their balaclavas and let Villa Master Qin take a good look at them. Let him see if they are the people he wants." Yes. The two subordinates heard this and roughly pulled off the two men's headgear, removing it from their faces. Qin Shengtian responded and looked over. He immediately saw the girl whose hood was ripped off. Her pair of golden eyes were like raging flames, emitting a tyrannical aura. Her mouth was covered by a cloth, so she couldn't speak. She could only use her pair of golden eyes to ferociously scan the crowd. That face was indeed that of the 9th imperial concubine on the wanted list, Jing Yu. That pair of strange eyes caused Qin Shengtian's body to tremble. It really was that woman with strange eyes. When Qin Shengtian turned to look at the masked man beside him, he saw that the masked man was dressed in black. Even though he was standing there with a pale face, he still exuded a cold aura. His black eyes looked towards Qin Shengtian, causing Qin Shengtian to freeze on the spot. 9th Emperors? Qin Shengtian's eyes were filled with astonishment as he looked at the black-clothed Xiao Chun, whose hands and mouth were tied. His brain momentarily slowed down as he felt that this scene was too dramatic. Ha ha ha. Villa Master Qin has good eyesight. This person is the 9th Emperor's and his 9th imperial concubine. Yuan Mingyuan laughed heartily. His eyes were filled with pride as he said, "The 9th Emperor's is truly an infatuated man. In order to save the 9th imperial concubine, he entered my Ghost King cave and was captured alive by this young master." "You, how did you do it?" "Don't talk about Yuan Mingyuan attacking Xiao Chun. If Yuan Mingyuan said that he won, Qin Shengtian definitely wouldn't believe it." Yuan Mingyuan narrowed his eyes coldly as he said, "Of course, I played some tricks and invited you into my trap. You used poison?" Qin Shengtian heard this and immediately understood. He looked at Yuan Mingyuan with a face of astonishment. "It's not poison. It's just some medicine." Yuan Mingyuan faintly said, "These two people have been poisoned with the bone-softening powder. Villager Master Qin can rest assured. Now even two ordinary people can easily capture these two people. You don't have to worry about them running away. This young master knows that the 9 emperors and the woman with different pupils aren't easy to deal with. That's why I tied them up. It wouldn't be good if something happened to them," Yuan Mingyuan said casually. Hee. Young Master Yuan is truly far-sighted. Only after hearing this did Qin Shengtian believe him. With Yuan Mingyuan's personality, it was normal for him to drug people. However, the people that they couldn't capture with tens of thousands of soldiers were actually caught by this pirate leader. Moreover, he caught both of them. This was inconceivable. There were indeed many strange things in this world. Villager Master Qin, you've seen these people. Now I want to see if I'm satisfied with the things that the imperial court brings out. Yuan Mingyuan stood with his hands behind his back and said, "Don't even think about taking them by force. If worst comes to worst, I'll fight to the death and kill the 9 emperors and the woman with different pupils. None of us will benefit from it." Hee. Young Master Yuan is too serious. I'll do what I say. I'll go back and get people to prepare the things that will definitely satisfy young Master Yuan. Qin Shengtian hurriedly said, "Okay, I'll keep these people. When Villager Master Qin's things arrive, I'll give them to you." Yuan Mingyuan didn't relent at all. His words caused Qin Shengtian's face to darken. Chapter 685. After their discussion, Qin Shengtian let out a sigh of relief and returned. When Lei Zhang heard the words Qin Shengtian brought back, he was so angry that his face turned ashen. He knew that Yuan Mingyuan had a strange temper, but he was still angry even after going against him for so long. Originally, this matter could have been easily resolved, but it had caused him to lose face. Not only had he failed to obtain any benefits, but this time, because of this Yuan Mingyuan, he had demanded an exorbitant price and threatened him. Wasn't this the same as causing Lei Zhang to lose a piece of his flesh? Lei Zhang knew that Yuan Mingyuan was trying to trip him up, but he had no choice but to brace himself. If Yuan Mingyuan really wanted to use brute force, then he would really be willing to fight to the death with Yuan Mingyuan. If he killed the 9th Imperial Uncle and the man with the other pupils, Lei Zhang would have no choice but to brace himself. Then even if he had 10 heads, it wouldn't be enough to chop them off. In this way, Lei Zhang could only raise money wantonly. In the end, he spent almost all of his wealth. It took him a day to sort it out, and then he took the ship to the Ghost King Cave. Lei Zhang didn't want to deliver anything. Last time, he swam back to the fleet in such a sorry state. So it was obvious that Lei Zhang had some resistance towards Yuan Mingyuan. Qin Shengtian naturally took on this heavy responsibility. He led a group of soldiers and several small boats filled with gold, silver, and jewels towards the Ghost King Cave. Yuan Mingyuan was already waiting by the shore. Seeing Qin Shengtian put down boxes after boxes of things, his eyes were full of smiles. Ha ha ha. It seems that Villa Master Qin came with sincerity. Yuan Mingyuan looked at the open boxes. Inside were layers upon layers of gold, silver, and jewels. He was very happy and patted Qin Tianqing's shoulder. Qin Tianqing didn't want to stay any longer. He laughed dryly and looked at Yuan Mingyuan. Hee hee, my sincerity has arrived. What about this person? Well said, well said. Yuan Mingyuan raised his hand and shouted, bring those 2 people to Villa Master Qin. Jingyu and Xiao Chun were still in the same position as yesterday. Their mouths and hands were tied. The 2 pirates roughly pushed the 2 people in front of Qin Shengtian. Qin Shengtian saw the 2 people being carried onto the ship and slowly let out a sigh of relief. Villa Master Qin, I heard that this woman with different pupils is not simple. Yuan Mingyuan watched as Jingyu and Xiao Chun were brought onto the boat. He narrowed his eyes and said to Qin Shengtian, Mannerhead Qin, go tell those people that some people can't be controlled just because they want to. What does young Master Yuan mean? Qin Shengtian's face stiffened. He looked at Yuan Mingyuan and asked. He. Yuan Mingyuan laughed coldly and said, everyone has ambition, but whether or not you can hold it depends on your ability. Villa Master Qin, do you really not understand why I would be so willing to give away such a great opportunity? Qin Shengtian was silent for a moment and looked at Yuan Mingyuan. Villa Master Qin, take care of yourself. Yuan Mingyuan looked at Qin Shengtian deeply. He laughed and waved his hand, calling for his brothers to carry the boxes of gold, silver, and jewels back into the Ghost King Cave. Qin Shengtian stood in place for a while. His face was serious. He didn't say anything and waved his hand. Xiao Chun and Jingyu were brought to the largest ship. Jingyu and Xiao Chun were brought onto the largest ship. Chapter 686. Jingyu's clothes were messy and her face was pale. Her golden eyes were indifferent as she looked at everyone. Everyone on the ship looked at Jingyu curiously. When they saw Jingyu's golden eyes, they were shocked by the fiery light in her eyes. Qin Shengtian's fiery eyes scanned the crowd. His face was expressionless and his entire body was emitting a dense killing intent. Qin Shengtian took a deep look at Jingyu before he turned around and entered the house. Then, Jingyu saw the door open and a few familiar figures walked out of the house. The person at the front was naturally the commander of this army, General Lei Zhang. The people following behind him were definitely the sect masters of some sects in the underworld. The 2 people on the right side of Lei Zhang made Jingyu's face even more gloomy. Hee hee. Jingyu, long time no see. She was dressed in a fiery red robe and had an extremely seductive face. She had a faint smile on her face as she looked at Jingyu with her seductive eyes. The words that came out of her mouth were filled with mockery, which made one's hair stand on end. Who else could it be but Yu? Jingyu looked away in disgust. Such a beautiful face, but it was on this woman's body. It was really disgusting. Jingyu's actions made Yu's eyes turn cold. Even though Jingyu was already a prisoner, she was still so arrogant. Her actions made Yu very disgusted. However, with so many people here, Yu could only grit her teeth and not flare up. Ninth Emperor's, Ninth Imperial Concubine. The two of you really made it difficult for this general to find you. Lei Zhang had the back of a tiger and the waist of a bear. His deep voice sounded like a roar even though he was speaking calmly. Xiao Chun and Jingyu were unmoved as they looked at Lei Zhang. It wasn't that they didn't want to speak. It was that their mouths were tied up. What do you want us to say? Thank you for your help. If it wasn't for your help, I'm afraid that we wouldn't have been able to deal with the people of Ghost King Cave. Lei Zhang turned around and bowed slightly to the crowd. Haha, what are you talking about? It's our duty to help the people of the world. Now that this traitor has been caught, we can rest assured. A man wearing a green robe cupped his fist and said to Lei Zhang. Jingyu snorted in disdain at his righteousness. Haha, since this criminal has been caught, this general will bring this criminal back to report. Lei Zhang opened his mouth and said, let's stop at Yangzhou for half a day and hold a celebratory feast for all of you heroes to thank you for your help. General Lei, it's natural to capture this traitor and bring him back to report. However, we should kill this woman with different pupils to prevent her from causing trouble outside. A white-haired man stepped forward and said, Hero Jiang, although your words are correct, this woman with different pupils is someone the Holy Family is looking for. It's said that the Holy Family's high priest has personally left the mountain and is heading towards Tokyo. It's not appropriate to kill this person with different pupils right now. Before Lei Zhang could speak, the person next to Yu spoke up. Wasn't this person dressed in snow-white robes and holding a folding fan the second young master of the poison sect, Yun Jing, who had surrounded Jingyu in the forest last time? Chapter 687. Yun Jing's face was handsome and elegant. Standing next to Yue, the two looked like a perfect couple. At this moment, the one who spoke was Yun Jing. As soon as he finished speaking, the person called Hero Jiang frowned slightly. He seemed to have also thought of this and turned his head to look at the person next to him. It's not that we can't kill her now, but we must see this person with different pupils die with our own eyes. The person next to Hero Jiang said, That's right. We must burn this evildoer to death. We can't let her bring disaster to the world. A burst of voices echoed. Their faces were filled with righteous indignation as they clamored to burn Jingyu to death. Jingyu coldly stood to the side, listening to these people's words. Her eyes were full of ridicule, and her pair of golden eyes slowly flashed with light. What bullshit bringing disaster to the world? Who did she, Jingyu, cause trouble for? Did she kill someone or set someone on fire? Did she rob someone or fucking kill their entire family? From the beginning to the end, these people were the ones who spread the word that the person with different pupils must be an evildoer and will definitely harm people. Xiao Chun seemed to feel the change in Jingyu. He slightly moved his body towards Jingyu. Jingyu felt Xiao Chun's touch and comfort. The raging unwillingness and thick, killing intent in her heart settled down a little. She slightly raised her head to look at Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun's pair of pitch-black eyes looked at Jingyu. There was a faint gentleness and comfort in his eyes, making Jingyu's heart soften. She blinked at Xiao Chun, indicating that she was fine. Everyone, don't worry. His Majesty will definitely punish this evildoer and give everyone an explanation. Lei Zhang smiled and comforted the crowd. He also said some indifferent guarantees. Only then did the crowd of Jianghu people calm down. Jingyu and Xiao Chun were also brought to a room under the cabin and locked up. The ship was moving. Jingyu and Xiao Chun were hung in the dark room. They could only hear the sound of the waves and some faint light from the edge of the bed. Jingyu leaned on Xiao Chen's chest with her eyes slightly closed. The surroundings were very quiet. Jingyu could only hear Xiao Chen's steady heartbeat from his chest. In order to make the show more realistic, the ropes tied around Jingyu and Xiao Chen's hands were not at all merciful. The strength used made Jingyu's wrists hurt. After so long, they had become numb. The cloth tied around Jingyu's wrists also hurt a lot. Xiao Chen opened his eyes in the dark cabin. He listened to Jingyu's breathing. He turned his head slightly and rubbed his face against Jingyu's head. Jingyu opened her eyes slightly and looked up at Xiao Chen. Neither of them could speak. They just looked at each other quietly. Then Jingyu smiled. Xiao Chen leaned against Jingyu's head and closed his eyes. The silence in the room lasted for an unknown amount of time. Jingyu leaned against Xiao Chen and fell asleep. This sleep was not a good one. Jingyu was awakened by the sound of the door opening. Two figures appeared in front of Xiao Chen and Jingyu. Judging from their red and white robes, they were Nailin Yu and Yun Jing of the Poison Sect. To see you again in this way really surprises this young master. Yun Jing's gaze first landed on Xiao Chen before turning to Jingyu. His eyes were filled with vengeance as he looked at Jingyu. Jingyu looked at Yun Jing indifferently. Then, her gaze seemed to move to Yun Jing's crotch on purpose. The mocking expression on her face made Yun Jing blush. He glared fiercely at Jingyu. Chapter 688. Jingyu was puzzled by their actions. She tilted her head to look at them, her eyes full of confusion. She didn't know what was going on between the two of them, but Xiao Chen knew. When he saw Jingyu's actions, his face darkened and became incomparably gloomy. Jingyu, Xiao Chen is the 9 emperors. He won't die once he returns to the Tokyo, but you're different. Nailin Yu gracefully stepped in front of Jingyu and Xiao Chen. Her seductive eyes looked at Jingyu and Xiao Chen standing so close together. Her expression was a little strange, but she still spoke up. I came here today to tell you that as long as you're willing to come with me and listen to me, I can guarantee that you won't die. Nailin Yu narrowed her eyes at Jingyu. You should know that the Poison Sect is considered a large sect. As long as you're obedient, Jingyu didn't wait for Nailin Yu to finish speaking. She snorted coldly and rolled her eyes, her face full of disdain. Jingyu, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Do you think you'll be safe once you return to the Tokyo? Nailin Yu's expression turned cold as she stared icily at Jingyu. Why waste your breath on them? Yun Jing spoke up. We'll just take her away tonight. Once we're in the Poison Sect, do you think we won't have a way to make her submit? Nailin Yu straightened and looked at Jingyu with incomparable coldness. That's true. As long as we're in the Poison Sect, I have a million ways to make you submit. Let's go. With that, Nailin Yu turned to leave. Yun Jing looked at Jingyu meaningfully. Jingyu could clearly see the excitement in Yun Jing's eyes. That expression made Jingyu furrow her brows tightly. She watched the two leave as a sharp light flashed in her eyes. It looks like her plan couldn't keep up with the changes. Nailin Yu and Yun Jing actually wanted to kidnap Jingyu. This would be troublesome. Jingyu lifted her head slightly to meet Xiao Chen's gaze. She could clearly see the icy coldness in Xiao Chen's eyes, which was incomparably chilling. He was clearly thinking that if the Poison Sect took Jingyu away, wouldn't he be separated from Jingyu? Xiao Chen moved his body and legs slightly. Jingyu raised her head and looked at Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen looked at Jingyu with burning eyes. His determined gaze made Jingyu frown. Jingyu shook her head. There was a blade hidden by the shoe for them to escape. Xiao Chen's actions clearly meant that he wanted Jingyu to take it out. They couldn't wait any longer. But Jingyu didn't agree with Xiao Chen's actions. Now wasn't the time. Xiao Chen seemed to be very anxious as he kept staring at Jingyu. Jingyu frowned helplessly. She wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. She could only stare at Xiao Chen. The two of them were silent for a long time before Xiao Chen kicked over some bucket in a fit of irritation. The commotion caused the guard to walk in. He cursed a few words before leaving. Xiao Chun kicked the bucket every once in a while. Eventually, the guard became impatient and simply ignored Xiao Chun. At this moment, the cabin became darker and darker. Xiao Chun became even more anxious. His eyes looked at Jingyu as if they were about to burst into flames. Jingyu's eyebrows twitched. She felt helpless, but she still followed Xiao Chen's instructions and moved her body to take out the blade. There were blades hidden by their feet. Jingyu took the one by Xiao Chen's feet, while Xiao Chun took the one by Jingyu's feet. The two of them held the blades in their hands. Just as they were about to cut the rope, there was a sudden movement outside the quiet cabin. Chapter 689. A muffled sound was heard. It seemed like someone had fallen to the ground. Jingyu and Xiao Chun looked at each other, their eyes flashing with a dignified expression. Nalan Yu's people had actually arrived so quickly? Xiao Chun and Jingyu hid the blades in their hands and quietly watched as the door opened. Two black figures flashed in. Take the woman. What about the man? The black-robed man asked. Second young master said he didn't want the man. One of the black-robed men replied. Miss Nalan said that if it was convenient, we could take the man with us as well. The other man was puzzled as he spoke. The two of them froze as soon as they finished speaking. They couldn't help but wonder if the two masters hadn't come to an agreement. What should they do now? Forget it. Take them both. They'll be discovered anyways. The black-robed man was silent for a moment, then coldly said, Hurry up. Let's do it. Several black-robed men walked over. They took out some kind of cloth and covered Jingyu and Xiao Chen's mouths. Jingyu was already prepared. The poison sect's people were experts in medicine. Jingyu held her breath the moment the man covered her mouth. Her golden eyes quietly turned dark green as she blinked at Xiao Chun. Then she pretended to be unconscious as her body went limp. She allowed the man to put her into a gunny sack and carry her over his shoulder. Let's go. Jingyu and Xiao Chun were silently taken away. The sea breeze was strong, and Jingyu could clearly feel herself being tied up with ropes as she was carried off the boat. She was almost touching the sea before being tossed to a certain spot. She could feel the boat floating. Jingyu opened her eyes slightly. She couldn't see anything, but she could hear the sound of water. After what seemed like a long time, Jingyu felt that she was being dragged up again. She could see that the sky was getting brighter. That person carried Jingyu and threw her onto a slightly moldy place. The landing was still wobbly, so it was obvious that they had just switched from one ship to another. Jingyu heard the sound of the lock being unlocked, and the world finally returned to silence. Jingyu didn't move. After waiting for a while to make sure that there was no one around, she moved her head and stuck it out. What kind of lousy sack is this? The smell of pig shit was so disgusting that Jingyu almost vomited. Jingyu took a deep breath. She was finally free. Fortunately, the person who tied the bag untied the mouth of the bag when he left. Otherwise, Jingyu would have to endure being stuck in it. Jingyu looked sideways and saw that Xiao Chun had also come out. His handsome face was so dark that it almost made Jingyu laugh out loud. Xiao Chen's hair was also very messy. She had known Xiao Chun for so long, but she had never seen Xiao Chun in such a sorry state. Xiao Chun took a deep breath and looked at Jingyu without saying anything. However, the hidden bitterness in his eyes was too deep. Jingyu tried to hold back her laughter, but she couldn't let herself laugh out loud. She just stood there shaking. The two of them breathed for a long time. Then, they heard footsteps outside the cabin. Their bodies suddenly quivered, and they hurriedly went back into the sack, closed their eyes, and continued to pretend. Where is he? A female voice sounded. It didn't need to be identified to know that this voice belonged to Nalan Yu. He's locked inside. He should be waking up soon. The guard replied. Open the door. Nalan Yu continued. Then, they heard the sound of the door being unlocked. Chapter 690. Jingyu could clearly feel the sound of footsteps approaching. Then, the sack was removed. Jingyu could almost feel Nailin Yu's gaze on her. "Go get some water and wake her up," Nailin Yu said indifferently.
Yes.
The person beside her replied and left. Jingyu was suddenly at a loss. Should she pretend to wake up? Jingyu thought about it and did so. She frowned and then pretended to open her eyes in a daze. The moment she opened her eyes, she saw Nailin Yu's face. Her expression changed and she looked around as if she was sizing up this place. "Don't look around. You are now on my boat." Nailin Yu saw that Jingyu had woken up and raised her eyebrows. Her eyes were filled with coldness. Jingyu heard this and turned to look at Nailin Yu. Her expression was calm without any change. Let alone panic, there wasn't even any surprise. When the person who went out came back with a basin of water, the unconscious Xiaochun also slowly woke up. He looked at Nailin Yu with a pair of cold eyes and then looked at Jingyu. Nailin Yu's face was ashen as she looked at the two people. The person who brought the basin of water was startled when he saw that both of them had woken up. He looked at the basin of water in his hand and then silently walked out with it. "Men, separate them," Nailin Yu said with a cold face. As soon as Nailin Yu's words fell, Xiaochun's murderous eyes looked towards Nailin Yu. Jingyu's face was also ashen. Nailin Yu saw that the two of them finally had a reaction. Her lips curled into a faint smile as she said, "You two want to be together, but I won't let you. Take her away." Jingyu pointed a finger at Jingyu and walked away with a cold and arrogant smile. Xiaochun suddenly stood up and wanted to stop her, but someone held him down. Jingyu was afraid that Xiaochun would act recklessly. When she was taken away again, she tilted her head and winked at Xiaochun. Xiaochun looked furious. He tried his best to stop them from taking Jingyu away, but in the end, he failed. Jingyu knew that Xiaochun understood her intention. Jingyu was forcefully brought into a room. The interior of the room was exquisitely decorated. Just by looking at the beautiful scenery of red muslin, one could tell that this was a woman's room. There was also a faint scent of incense in the room. "Remove the cloth from her mouth." Nailin Yu was dressed in red and sat on a soft couch. She looked down at Jingyu. Compared to Jingyu, Nailin Yu's gorgeous clothes were simply superior. However, Jingyu didn't seem to care at all. After the cloth was removed from her mouth, Jingyu moved her teeth without a care for her image. She spat out a mouthful of phlegm onto the incomparably clean floor. A pair of golden eyes indifferently looked at Nailin Yu. "Why did you impatiently bring me here?" Jingyu mockingly looked at Nailin Yu and said, "What method are you thinking of to break me and Xiaochun apart?" "Jingyu, don't be too proud." Nailin Yu's face was cold as she looked at Jingyu and said, "I called you here to talk to you. As long as you listen to me, I promise that I won't do anything to you in the future." "Hey, disgusting." Jingyu looked at Nailin Yu with disgust and said, "Who do you think you are? Listen to you? Ha ha ha." "Jingyu, don't push your luck." Nailin Yu suddenly stood up and angrily shouted, "You should know that you are now my prisoner. As long as I want to, I can kill you with a single finger." "Huh? Kill me? Do you dare?" Jingyu's eyes were filled with disdain. She arrogantly sat on the ground. Her pair of golden eyes were arrogant and passionate like a king. She was clearly looking up at Nailin Yu, but it was more like she was looking down at her. It made people's hearts tremble. Chapter 691. You. Nailin Yu's face was ice cold as she stood up and walked towards Jingyu. She looked down at Jingyu and her beautiful eyes were filled with killing intent. "Killing you? Wouldn't that be letting you off too easily? Jingyu, you are now like a stray dog, despised by the people of the world and wanted to kill you. Do you feel good now?" Nailin Yu's eyes narrowed as she indifferently looked at Jingyu. "You want to know? If you want to know, then come and try." "Ha ha." Jingyu sat cross-legged on the ground as she looked at Nailin Yu with a mocking smile. "Looking at your proud appearance, it seems that Xiao Yi being able to send out troops to capture you so quickly must have had a lot to do with you, right? Ha ha ha. Speaking of which, You should go and thank your good sister. Nalan Yu walked over to a soft chair and sat down. She raised her hand to pour herself a cup of tea and said, if it wasn't for Xiang Fei's support, how could this miss have caught you so quickly? Jing Yu's chest tightened as a cold light flashed in her eyes. She already knew that Ning Shengyun wouldn't let this go, but she didn't think that the two of them would join forces. I've really troubled you. Jing Yu coldly laughed as she indifferently curled her lips and said, so what if you caught me? You'll only attract countless soldiers. Nalan Yu, did you really think that everything would be fine once you caught me? Ha ha ha. When Nalan Yu heard Jing Yu's words, she didn't say anything. Instead, she paused for a moment before laughing out loud. The gaze that she used to look at Jing Yu caused Jing Yu's heart to skip a beat as her eyebrows furrowed. What was with Nalan Yu's expression? Could it be that there was something she didn't know about? Very soon, you will know your use. Nalan Yu narrowed her eyes and said, Shadow, take her away and lock her up? Yes. The black-clothed man standing at the side of Jing Yu's room walked forward and lifted his hand to drag her out of the room. Jing Yu looked deeply at Nalan Yu. She felt that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Was there something she didn't know? These people didn't seem to want to kill him. Instead, they wanted to obtain him. Why? Jing Yu was brought to another cabin by the shadow. She was not locked up with Xiao Chun. Jing Yu stood in the cabin and looked around. The hidden blade finally came in handy. Jing Yu walked around and put her ears to the wooden planks to listen to the movements outside. Jing Yu held the blade and silently cut the rope. Through the cracks in the wooden planks, she could see the vast sea. The ship was moving forward. Jing Yu cut for a long time before she finally cut the rope. Jing Yu rubbed her sore wrists and carefully put away the blade. So annoying. Jing Yu's face was dark. She hid the rope and turned around to listen to the movements behind the wooden planks. Jing Yu listened for a long time, but she didn't hear anything. She turned around. It seemed a little unwise to untie the rope now. With this thought in mind, Jing Yu walked over and took out the rope. She tied a beautiful knot, then put her hand in it and tightened it with her mouth. At first glance, it didn't look like it was untied. In fact, as long as Jing Yu pulled on the end of the rope, it would be untied. Jing Yu looked at her tied hands and nodded with satisfaction. Just as she was about to move, she heard the sound of the door opening again. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.